Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our day of the throat in the physical week of Gemini. Today, Mercury retrograde was finished. Let's see how the next days are coming, because I guess we have 3 months to rest. So within the Merkaba that we are shaping this 6 months, we begin today being day 22. We begin today with our new intention for this whole month, which is I am sound, until the next 22nd, which will be in July. A partir de hoy corresponde el atributo de yo soy sonido. I remind you that the thing that we are following, whoever resounds with this, we are starting every 22nd, and for the days until the other 22nd, when we go to sleep, we just say the statement I am and the attribute for that month, which for this new month is I am sound. So it's just when you go before you go to sleep, creating a big Merkaba between all of us. So let's begin with our topic for today, which is the verb. I'm a little bit tired, sorry. So the word verb comes from the Indo-European language where, and where is basically related to the action of saying something, or basically is the action itself in the shape of a word. So if we go back into the etymology, we will see that the word where and the word werg are kind of the same, and they are related in the origin, and werg is the origin of the word work for English, which is work. Verb and work are very much related because they are two concepts that are talking about an action, to take action into something. So verb is basically something that describes the action that someone, a subject, is doing. So let's remember what is a subject. A subject is someone, the someone that is doing the action. So we have mainly the ones that we call I, you, he or she, we, you in plural, and they. So we have the 6, which in English are much more neutral. For some of them, we have feminine and masculine. So the pronouns are the main subjects that do an action. So of course, that depending on the language, it can change, because in English you don't have much division in between feminine and masculine. In Spanish, we have a lot of divisions between feminine and masculine. Some languages has also neutral aspects of language. Some others has another pronoun, which is for only 2 people, which is very different from the plural of they. So there are many different pronouns that can be used, but mainly they are all around this 6. So this subject, this person, or also this object, will set itself into action by moving the energy into a direction, into a work. We used to say that the work of energy, that the movement is a part of a work of a subject to create energy. So this movement of energy that we are doing, that we call the work of energy, is something that can help us understand why in the origin of the languages we call work and word and verb exactly the same, because they means the same. Is a force of action that someone does. So this also the action, the verb, will be separated by the or expressed by the subject in different aspects, which are the aspects of time and the aspects of space. So when we get the aspects of space, of time, the subject will realize this action in the past, the present, or the future. Of course, that these are the main three times that someone can make an action. But then, with the evolution of the language, we start to try to specify exactly when I did or someone did that action. So that's why we eventually start to have different kinds of past, different kinds of present, and different kinds of future. So we could specify that, and it makes much more rich the language, so we can communicate better. In the same way as we have a trinity of time in the verb past, present, and future, even if they start to divide a lot, in many languages we have also a trinity to describe the verb in space. So the trinity of space, in a verb would be the subject, which is the one that makes the action, that defines the verb. The lexeme, which will be the root of the verb, so is the part that doesn't change of the verb, unless it's like the verb to be, which is very different, which is irregular verb. And then we have the third part, which is the destinance. That is the last part of the verb, usually in certain languages. That is the part that changes all the time to describe the plural, the singular, or the past, the present, future, and all this kind of, or also terms of way of how it expressed. So the parts that change constantly inside the verb. So now we can understand kind of the aspect of the verb. So we can understand the structure of it, and from this we can, the most important thing to get from what is the verb is that the verb is the description of the energy. It's basically a way in which we can pronounce, say, and express, describe what is energy. Okay, so that's the main key to understand the importance of the verb, because it's how we can pronounce and determine the energy of things. So the verb is kind of this arrow when we speak that holds all the energy of the sentence and the intention, and determines how it's going to be, determines what is the energy that will manifest. So this is why it's so important to realize the power of the verb, because it's the one that energetically encodes all the energy, the strength to make something possible. So basically, all the other things that go around the verb are the ones that, like satellites, helps to the intention of the verb, but all of them are changing around the verb, and that's why it's so important. It's the other things are just going around and and go straight to, so the verb goes straight to the point and the rest of the things go around. Una frase sin un verbo puede existir, pero el verbo es el que le da todo el sentido a la frase. So a sentence without a verb can exist, but is the verb the one that gives a meaning to the entire sentence. So the very ancient humans, they discover us talking and playing with the words, that the verb was the most important word that it could use, because it was describing the power of what they have done or what they were intending to do. So so it was describing the action of things. So that's why it was so important than other words. So in the very beginning, there was no a word to describe a verb. There was no verb as we know it today. For them, what they were doing was describing an action, something that they were making, doing. So it was a work of energy. So, but not a work of energy like doing Reiki, okay? Work of energy like working something, doing something with your hands. So that was the way in which they were describing what was a verb. It was just action, to take action into something. So one of the things that happened in the very past was that every one of the actions that we were doing, we start to verbalize that. We start to say a word to describe the action that we were doing. That's the origin of how a verb begins, to describe the action that we were doing. So what people start to do was to teach others with the verb that they were describing the action. So that showed them that by just saying the name, they could give the word, so others would know how to make the work. So that's how we start to realize that the verb was action that allows us to create, to do stuff with our energy. At the beginning, the verb was not a verb as we know it today. The verb is basically the creation of a concept, of an object that is now into action. So in the past, they didn't create words for verbs to describe actions. It was not an invention. They were just taking the words of the objects they were doing, and they just added something to describe the action that they were doing with that. So for example, it's easy in English to understand this because you don't have these enclitics and all these variations of the verb like in Spanish we have. But in English and the Saxon languages, it's easier because, for example, you have the word work, and it can be a verb or it can be an object, a concept. Okay, like the only difference you have in English to separate a verb from the object is the word to, which describes the direction where it goes. So to work is that there is a movement, an action towards that object. Okay, so the object, the noun that we are using are basically something that is physical, that existed. Okay, so it's something that was described by people with the sounds that were similar to the object that they were using. But suddenly this object or this noun that we were using, just by adding the to, we have the action, the verb. So this is how a verb begins. It's just describing it's just describing how something is into action. Think about this. if every object, every noun that we use to describe an object is basically us saying the action of something, so it doesn't matter what object, what noun you take from the world. It doesn't matter which one, anything, could be whatever. If you put an action on that, it means that everything can have action and everything is energy. If everything is energy and everything can be done as an action, so this means that everything is a verb. Everything is a word. So follow this line. If everything that exists can be taken into an action, so everything basically is energy because you can make an action with it. It means that the entire creation is a verb. So it means also that the entire universe is a constant action, moving energy. So the entire creation is a verb, which brings us to the idea that so the creator is also the verb. So why for all the ancient cultures God is the verb? Because the verb is the thing that makes everything move, that is the vibration that allows everything to take action. So that's why the creator should be exactly the energy that creates and manifests and moves everything that exists. So now we reach this sentence, and pay attention to the sentence. In the beginning, there was the verb, and the verb was God. That's very important to understand. In the beginning was the verb, and the verb was God. So what happened in the creation is that basically the verb is the main thing that exists. The verb as vibration is the vibration, the movement in action, something that starts to move, this wave of vibration that is creating everything. But in the beginning, when it starts to move and creating the waves of vibration, the movement of action, in the same moment, something happened, that the vibration becomes itself the action and the subject that creates the action. This is why they say at the beginning was the verb, and the verb was God. So what happens after this? That all this big wave of vibration, the first action, starts to spread, but it creates different waves. And these waves will be actions, so verbs. And every time that one of them happens, something new is created. And that's why we know this sentence. And God said, and God said, and God said, and God said, once and again. And suddenly this vibration, this wave, became a particle. And God said, and now it's light. And God said, and now it's atom. And then God said is is a molecule, and from molecule to a component, a chemical component, and then we have hydrogen, oxygen, phosphor, and again and again, and we create chemical reactions, and then we start to create planets and stars, planets, worlds, and evolution and species, and God said, and God said, and God said, and God said, all the time. Vibration. So these waves of vibration, the different waves of vibration, are the ones that we start to call frequencies, and all the frequencies starts to create different realities, and all these different realities are the ones that we remember as God said, and God created, and God was willing to create this, and blah blah blah. But it's only vibration, verbs creating constantly. So these waves of vibration starts to get much and much complicated, much and very, very weird connection. So eventually, throughout millions of years of evolution, these same waves of vibration end up creating a brain. And the brain starts to create a way in a species that are able to pronounce the vibrations, the verbs that are an echo from the ones from the beginning. And we are made at the same image. We are made alike. So what happened then is when we realize that the verb, the action, starts to become also our own creation, the way in which we can manifest. So we start to be able to create, acknowledging the subjects, acknowledging the predicate, acknowledging the complements, which are their chakras. So this is why when you read or have heard about the Genesis, the beginning of the things, we don't have to see the descriptions as something real. We have to understand it as just a description of how people could understand in that time the realities that today we can describe in a different way. Like, for example, it is so much information, the creation, it happens in so much time, in millions and billions of years, and they don't have even years, so they have to call it stages. But there was no way to call a stage 1, stage 2, so they call it days, because that's how people could understand what it means, a period of time. So they call it first day, in the second day, in the third day, even if it were not days. Also, they were describing how the verb became flesh. And it's not that, is how vibration starts to create energy, and the energy of action, the verb, manifests into matter through chemical reactions. That happens in millions of years, billions of years. And of course, when it describes God on the water and floating on the water, they could not describe how it was time, this illusion that moves like waves. It was impossible to describe the waves. So that's why they compare it with an ocean. That's why they said water. So we cannot take all these stories that were told by people that hadn't the tools to understand what they were experiencing or remembering. They were just describing things as they could with the tools they had around. So to read a book of history about the creation, sometimes we make the mistake of reading them like if it was true, and it's just a description of something. It's like going to the cinema and look for, I don't know, the Avengers, and you say, wow, so this is really happening in New York. It's like, it's happening now. What the hell is happening in New York? It's like if you are seeing the news, and no, it's just a movie from Marvel, whatever, the Avengers, I don't know. We have to understand that they were stories. It's a description, it's a descriptor way of a time. So what do we take about this? We take the importance of verb. Because even if it seems really crazy, every time that we say a sentence, we are creating a Merkaba, a tiny Merkaba in the vibrational realm. So first of all, let's remember this. Verb. What is verb? Verb is action. It means action, energy in action. So we have to remember that. So whenever we say a verb, we are setting a seed of action into the space. And that seed is created by a Merkaba. And this tiny Merkaba is created by all the complements that the verb has. So all the complements, direct, indirect, of the verb are creating the chakras of the verb. And then the time, the ways, the space, the subject, predicate, prepositions, all these kind of things, they all create the Merkaba around. So every time that we make a sentence, we spread a tiny Merkaba to the space. So every time that we say a sentence, it's like if we are giving a cell to the space, and every cell is united to another one, creating an organism that starts to create a big being that we call egregor. And all this information starts to grow throughout all the time that we speak and shape a being in a realm that we used to call Akashic records. This conjunction of verbs, of sentences, starts to create beings, different important beings that live in the Akashic records, that shape something, a being itself that has its own life. So to understand this, when we speak, the information starts to go into this realm of Akashic records that starts to create big, huge beings that by resonance, they get together to one another. So for example, all the people that talk about love in the planet, their talks, their sentences of love, they all go to the same part of the library, because it's like kind of the same being. By resonance, they get together. So this means that eventually someone can channel this information from that entity. So we can channel that information. And it's not that we are channeling someone is that we are channeling the information that these people have said and left in the environment. This is why many of us, we can channel the same people, remember the same lives, channel the same messages, because we are connected to the same cloud. So we have different ways to call it today. The ancient ones used to call it the different heavens. But today we can call it the cloud, or we can call it the server. All this information that is around, that is in the cloud, in the server, we can also biologically call it the neurons, the archives of information that are in the nervous system. We can, for example, understand this like saying that we are simple cells that walk around and we have no idea of what is happening in our subconscious. We usually don't know what is happening in our subconscious. We have a lot of information inside of us, but we are not aware of that until something happened that makes us remember or to know through a therapy or whatever. We can figure that out. So when you connect to this network of information, it's like connecting to the subconscious. It's like, why? I had no idea that all this information was around. It was everywhere, but it's there. And most of this information is registered there by the word, the verb, the things that we say. This is all the information that we can download and manifest in this world. So as I was watching here, of course, that we that is not only the verbs that are registered there. The feelings, the thoughts, the dreams, they are all there. They're all in this environment of information. So every pulse that we emit is there. So we can access that in different ways, many different ways. And of course, there are some of these entities of information that are bad and others that are good. So there is information about anything. But above all, remember, please, the verb is the one that allows all that information to be manifested or not. So pay attention to that, and the rest is just a complement. The vibration for today is K. The statement today is, I am a product of vibration.